as a final note, because we can see it here, our Codegen setup. This is one of the features which I would cover in a different course, but this is like it's a very interesting feature because it's a pretty powerful one. One of the problems with tracking is implementation. And why is implementation so hard? Because it's usually something that developers don't do every day. So they just do it from time to time. Sometimes developers just, I don't know, one time a year because it doesn't happen so often. And so it's pretty easy. So first of all, it's a lot of overhead for them to basically look what they have done before, how it was implemented, and then bring it in. And so it takes some, let's say, overhead time or preparation time to basically start out. And what Codegen is doing, it basically helps with two things. So first of all, it makes, let's say, the preparation time easier if it's set up once in a good process. And then secondly, what it does is like it basically takes a little bit out the manual error problems that can happen. It's like, so of course, what can happen is when someone implements a tracking, they have this property, and for some reasons, I don't know, because they did it quickly, they just forget this one. So they just write length, or maybe they just write this. So they just forget this. And the problem is when they do it, so if it's a new implementation, yes, then you just have a difference between tracking plan and other implementation. So not nice, but definitely not something that will break it. But what can happen is like if this is already an implemented property, and this property then is used downstream to run the very important content performance report, and there's a specific chart in there that is showing basically the increase of watched content, so like content watch time, very important metric. And someone changes this from this kind of notation to this one and deploys it. At that point, everything will break downstream. And you don't want it to break because like maybe your CEO just is about to give a presentation in front of investors. And the watch time chart, which was a central part of his presentation, and because he was trusting the setup, he wanted to show live. Because he wanted to show, okay, actually today we already had this kind of hours of watch time, and then it breaks, and then it doesn't show up. And so these are things that can happen, especially when you work with this. These are a lot of variables, and so you can make them wrong. And so, and the problem is like implementation code is not really connected to these kind of systems. So if a developer changes this, they will not see an error. If they do a variable wrong in the application code, they will immediately see an error and can fix it. Here, they don't see an error immediately. And this is what Codegen does. So Codegen basically gives them an immediate error, or it does a type check. So with Codegen, you can basically create a wrapper around your tracking code. So for example, if you use segments, so it creates a wrapper around the segment tracking code, and it uses the event and property data and schema to create a own SDK, so that your developers can only then use the events and properties that you have defined. So if they would start to write length without _s, they will get an error. They would immediately see that there's a type error because this property without _s hasn't been defined yet. And so they will immediately see, okay, this is wrong, and they will also, if they use syntax highlighting and so like also like syntax suggestions, they will immediately see how the real property name is. And so by that, you can reduce this kind of errors usually down to 0. So I implemented Codegen in 3 or 4 projects, and in one we had significant problems before. The problems were often like because Android developers were doing something different than iOS developers, so writing it different because 2 different persons, and for some reasons they didn't really follow the instructions. And we had a lot of problems there. At the time when we introduced Codegen, this went away immediately because they were not able to write something different because it will always raise an error during implementation. So this is a really powerful thing, but if you want to use this, this is like something that you have to work together between development and then the people who basically run the tracking plan. So this is definitely a developer topic, but I would highly recommend to show this and discuss with your developers if you want to use this already when you start to do your implementation, because it can save you a lot of time in the end. Okay, I guess enough talking. We have to do something.